Are you ready to uncover the dark and dangerous secret that's been hiding in plain sight? Today we're exposing the truth about the drug that's being tearing apart lives, funding wars, and now creeping into our own backyard. If you've ever wondered how a little pill could turn into a global crisis, stick around, because this is a story you can't afford to ignore. Welcome back to the channel, interns. Today we're diving into a deep topic that's making waves across the globe: Captagon. You may have seen headlines calling it the poor man's cocaine or the jihadist drug of the Middle East. But what exactly is it? Why is this drug wreaking havoc in parts of the world, and why should you care about it? Well, in this video, we're not just talking about its controversial role in global conflicts, we're also going to dive into the serious health risks and physiologic effects that come with using it.
BBC News Arabic uncovered new direct links between this multi-billion-dollar drug trade and leading members of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's family and armed forces.
Just a little foreshadowing for you, but first things first, let's talk about what Captagon actually is. Captagon, also nicknamed Abu Hilalain in Arabic, was originally developed in the 1960s by a German pharmaceutical company called Dugessa AG. It was created as a brand name for a drug called phenethylene, which is a combination of two substances, amphetamine and theophylline. At first, it seemed like a freaking medical miracle. Doctors prescribed Captagon to treat conditions like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, narcolepsy, and even depression. The goal was to help patients stay focused, stay awake, and improve their overall mood without the intense side effects of traditional amphetamines. It was marketed as a safer, less addictive alternative to other stimulants.
Take drugs or alcohol?
What is drugs? But guess what? That was a big, fat, bald-faced lie. By the 1980s, it became clear that Captagon was, in fact, highly addictive. And it came with a crap ton of negative side effects,
which include derealization, hallucinations, agitation, and a decrease in pain perception.
And the rare cases of, heart attack, seizures, and delusions. So countries around the world began banning it, and by 1986, it was classified as a controlled substance under the United Nations Convention on Psychotropic Substances. So legally speaking, Captagon should have disappeared from the scene. But as we'll see, that's far from what happened. We should know by now that just because a drug isn't legal doesn't mean people aren't still producing, selling, and consuming it. After official production of Captagon ceased, remaining stocks were smuggled from Eastern Europe, particularly Bulgaria, to the Middle East, where counterfeit tablets began to be produced in the 1990s. The raw materials can really be sourced from anywhere, often from countries like China and India, and the chemical synthesis is fairly straightforward. This means it's not really that hard to make if you know the recipe, and it was the combination of that, as well as the high demand, profitability, weak enforcement, and the geopolitical context at the time that helped sustain the Captagon trade in the Middle East. But why were people so set on keeping this drug alive? To understand why Captagon is so popular, let's break down its chemical structure. Captagon's active ingredient, phenethylene, is broken down in the body into two primary components: amphetamine and theophylline. If the word amphetamine rings a bell, that's because it's the same substance found in drugs like methamphetamine and even Adderall. For more on those videos, be sure to check out my video series on Adderall and ADHD.
Adderall, Ritalin, they're all pretty much the same thing. They're just brain stimulants that just kind of make you feel like you're going a million miles. It's regulated speed, pretty much.
Here's the kicker. The combination of amphetamine and theophylline makes Captagon more potent than either substance alone. Amphetamine stimulates the central nervous system by increasing the release of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, which leads to a euphoric high, heightened energy, and increased focus. This surge in neurotransmitters can also cause elevated heart rate, blood pressure, and feelings of alertness. Theophylline, on the other hand, is a bronchodilator that enhances alertness by inhibiting the enzyme phosphodiesterase, which increases cyclic AMP levels, a molecule that helps boost energy and improve cell function, thereby reducing fatigue and improving breathing. In layman's terms, theophylline is basically this:
a caffeine-like substance that intensifies and hastens the effects of amphetamines.
Put these two together, And you have a drug that makes people feel invincible, hyper-focused, and ready to take on the world, bro. But as with most things in life, what goes up must come down. The crash that follows a Captagon high can be brutal, leaving users feeling anxious, depressed, and desperate for another dose. But why is Captagon specifically so popular for recreational use? Well, it's become particularly popular, especially in the Middle East, for several reasons. Firstly, affordability.
An amphetamine manufactured for a few cents, retailed for $25 a pill.
Unlike cocaine or heroin, Captagon is relatively cheap to produce. This makes it accessible to a wider range of people, from students cramming for exams to partygoers looking for a boost. Secondly, for performance enhancement. Students take it to study longer, workers use it to pull all-nighters, and soldiers use it to stay awake and alert during combat. Kind of like German super soldiers did in World War II.
Many of the soldiers were not driven only by enthusiasm, but also by a newly invented synthetic stimulant, methamphetamine.
And thirdly, the euphoric effects I previously mentioned. Captagon users report feeling confident and unstoppable, which makes it appealing to those looking for a temporary escape from their realities. And while you might associate this with chasing a high, it's often more about escaping a low, which is why Captagon is widely used in developing nations. As Carolyn Rose, director of the New Line Institute, a nonprofit think tank in Washington, D.C., focused on enhancing U.S. foreign policy, said in a Channel 4 news segment,
if you want to stave hunger, or if you're income insecure or food insecure, Captagon is very lucrative because it allows you to subsist on maybe 1 to 2 meals per day.
So not only does the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine get you hyper, it also reduces hunger signals in the brain. So in places where large populations struggle to survive, whether because of war or a significant wealth gap, this drug becomes especially enticing. Captagon's popularity skyrocketed in the Middle East, particularly in countries like Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and Syria. In Saudi Arabia, reports suggest that up to 40% of high school students have tried Captagon at least once. That's a staggering statistic. But as I said, Captagon abuse isn't limited to students and partygoers. During the Syrian civil war, Captagon played a dark role in the conflict. Militias and extremist groups reportedly used the drug to keep their fighters awake and fearless during battles. It's even been referred to as the jihadist drug because of its widespread use among militants. Now, let's talk about one of the darkest chapters in Captagon's story: its role in the Syrian conflict. After the Syrian civil war broke out, the country's economy collapsed. In the chaos, various groups began producing Captagon to fund their activities. The 4th Division is an elite army task unit led by Bashar al-Assad's brother, Mahar. So government soldiers, being the only ones able to freely cross checkpoints, were involved in moving the drug, although they'd often use people they'd considered dispensable, sometimes women and children, to actually carry out the work. Either way, the Assad regime allegedly used the drug trade to generate revenue, with reports suggesting that Captagon became one of Syria's largest exports.
The country has access to Mediterranean shipping lanes like the port of Latakia and has established smuggling routes to access other countries in the region, from Syria into Jordan and Iraq, extending further to reach Saudi Arabia, Yemen and Oman. Other routes lead via Beirut's air and seaports.
Think about that for a second. A government, including its former president, using an illegal drug trade to fund its operations. That's some serious Breaking Bad level stuff.
Under the rule of Bashar al-Assad, Syria became the global production epicenter of the lucrative drug, which raked in more money than did the combined drug trade of Mexico's cartels.
Assad is doing all of this to destabilize his regional neighbors, which is his one grand strategy, and also to continue to generate the revenues that he needs in order to keep waging war.
And then the drug makes its way, either intentionally or more often negligently, into the hands of terrorist groups, fueling violence and instability. It's a vicious cycle that not only impacts public health, but also geopolitics.
Numerous reports have also claimed that Lebanese Shia group Hezbollah plays a key role in facilitating the distribution of Captagon across the region.
Now, here's where things get even more concerning. In recent years, Captagon's reach has started expanding beyond the Middle East. Overall, the synthetic drug revolution is sweeping across North America. Authorities have found Captagon pills in major drug busts in Europe, signaling that this crisis is going global.
For example, in Germany and the Netherlands, there have been Captagon manufacturing centers. In Austria, there was a trafficking ring that was busted.
So what does this mean for you and me? It means we need to be aware of this drug and its dangers. The last thing we want is for Captagon to take hold in our communities the way it has in other parts of the world. In order to prevent that, we need to know what to look for. So how can we even recognize Captagon? Captagon pills are usually white or beige and often have a distinctive logo stamped onto them, such as 2 crescent moons. However, counterfeit versions can look different, so it's not always easy to identify them. I'm sure you're all at least somewhat familiar with the effects of meth and caffeine, but ephedrine is another stimulant used to treat breathing problems. Medically, it works by constricting blood vessels in the nasal passages, reducing swelling and congestion, and stimulating the release of norepinephrine, which can increase heart rate and blood pressure. So what makes Captagon even more dangerous is that dealers often cut it with cheaper ingredients like ephedrine to make more products. It's a common tactic for drug dealers, but a recipe for disaster health-wise, because mixing stimulants with other stimulants increases the risks dramatically. No matter the purity, Captagon is dangerous. In the short term, it can cause dangerously rapid heart rate, increased body temperature, and fast breathing, things you'd expect when overly ramped up. Chronic use significantly raises the risk of arrhythmias, or disruptions in heart rhythm, high blood pressure, heart attacks, and strokes. In rare cases, all that agitation can even cause some stimulant users to experience formication.
And this is the feeling of little bugs crawling under the person's skin. As a result, people often pick and scratch at their skin, which results in open wounds and an increased likelihood for infection.
Prolonged stimulant abuse can also damage the liver and kidneys, putting vital organs at risk. It can also lead to a condition called meth mouth, where teeth get damaged. This happens because the drugs typically dry out the mouth, cause bad eating habits, make people crave sugary food, and cause grinding of the teeth, all of which lead to serious teeth problems. Over time, the abuse of stimulants can also cause severe mental health issues, including depression, psychosis, and neurological changes in the brain that affect judgment and impulse control, making it difficult to think rationally. Additionally, long-term use can lead to sleep deprivation, fatigue, and cognitive decline, making mental health even worse, bro. And of course, addiction and tolerance are major concerns with stimulants. As you use the drug, your body becomes accustomed to both the elevated levels of neurotransmitters, which lowers your natural baseline production of said neurotransmitters, but also the steeper the peak, meaning the speed in which that high was reached. And in the case of stimulant drugs, it's super freaking fast. This determines how low you feel afterwards and leads to an intense craving for the drug once it wears off, as you now feel the need for it just to feel normal. That is how you would have felt had you not taken it at all. The body's homeostatic mechanisms also play a key role in the drug's effects weakening over time, as your body adapts to its presence and builds tolerance. This leads to the need for higher and higher doses to achieve the same results. While long-term users may be harder to spot, the effects of someone who has recently used a stimulant like Captagon are often quite apparent. If you suspect someone might be using Captagon in a given situation, look for signs such as extreme hyperactivity, dilated pupils, rapid speech, and aggressive behavior, and also a lack of appetite. And if you ever encounter someone who you think has overdosed on Captagon, here's what you should do. Number 1, call emergency services immediately. An overdose can be life-threatening, and time is of the essence. Number 2, keep the person calm and still. Try to keep them from moving around too much, as increased activity can make the situation worse. Number 3, provide basic first aid. If they're unconscious, replace them in the recovery position to keep their airway open. And number 4, be honest with medical professionals. When paramedics arrive, tell them exactly what you suspect the person took. This information can be crucial for their treatment. Even if you don't think you'll encounter Captagon, the rise of synthetic recreational drugs, often laced with or made entirely from unknown substances, means the best way to stay safe is by being fully aware of what you're consuming at all times. If you're at a party or social event, don't accept pills or substances from anyone you don't know. Stick to drinks you've prepared yourself, and never ever leave your drink unattended. Education is key. Talk to your friends and family about the dangers of Captagon. The more people know about this drug, the less likely they are to fall victim to it. Unfortunately, in regions where Captagon is most prevalent, people are often ill-equipped to handle the consequences of its widespread use. As highlighted in an article for the Atlantic Council, many young people in Saudi Arabia are addicted to this drug. Yet, the country's medical facilities are ill-equipped to address the issue, since addiction is often viewed more as a criminal problem than as a public health concern. This is particularly troubling when you consider the circumstances under which the drug is being introduced to the public, often with little or no intervention from the authorities, and even sometimes direct involvement. So, Captagon is more than just a drug. It's a global crisis that's ruining lives and funding conflicts. Even if Captagon wasn't on many Westerners' immediate radar, we can't ignore how its impact on other countries ultimately affects us too. By staying informed, spreading awareness, and supporting those affected by addiction, we can fight back against this deadly substance. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the world of Captagon. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content on substance abuse, mental health, and medical topics. If you didn't like the video, be sure to let me know why in the comment section down below. We're working towards a goal of 1 million subs, and we would love to have you with us when we get there. Don't forget to follow my gym, Human 2.0 Fitness, for free right here on YouTube, where we post content that helps you move better and prevent injury. Or its sister channel, Human at Home, where we show you how to be healthy in the place where you live. And of course, peep the new merch, support the fam, Team 8 Billion. Otherwise, as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho, where we see one, do one, teach one.